All right, good afternoon or good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our third assessment workshop here on the first Tuesday of the month. We're, of course, here in June. My name is Nolan Duda. I'm the Client Experience Manager for Ideal Traits. And today we have a guest joined with us, Brandy, who will introduce herself here in just a second once we cover what we're going to go over throughout the next 30 to 45 minutes, or maybe even longer, depending on how many questions you guys have. But a couple of the personalities that we're going to focus on today are going to be those persuasive and convincing focused personalities, right? So those individual personalities are the nurturer, the competitor, the networker, and the knowledgeable, often commonly referred to as the triple threat. So a couple of takeaways that we're going to have here is how persuasive and convincing and thorough compliance can shape relationships, right, within these personalities, how to enhance customer service and client relationships by utilizing these personalities within your business on a day-to-day basis, and then also pairing empathy and performance to make sure that the personalities stay intact. Because typically with these personality-focused personalities, oftentimes they can get overly focused on being empathetic rather than focusing on the result, right? So we're going to pair those two things together to make sure that we give you a good dose of how to manage the personalities and how to use it best. And to your question, yes, this is recorded. So typically the recording is uploaded to the YouTube series either later this afternoon or tomorrow. So if you do have to jump off, you do have a client come into your office or whatever the situation may be reassured that you'll be able to catch up with us on the recordings that are uploaded to that series. I will put that in the Q&A section here in a little bit, but I did just throw our referral link in there. So if you do have folks that you know, no matter what industry they're in, that could use some help with their staffing and recruiting, maybe utilizing personality assessments within their staffing and recruiting process, fill out that form. Our team will reach out and go through, obviously, the options to get them started too. But yes, will be recorded. I'll put the link to the past sessions if maybe you're joining us for the first time or want to review those two as well. But Brandy, I apologize for that long-winded response before we get to you. Thank you for hopping on. If you want to introduce yourself a little bit, and then we can get things rocking and rolling.
Yeah, so like Nolan said, my name's Brandy. I am the client support team lead. So I lead our customer support and via chats, phone calls, onboarding. I'm sure a lot of you guys have chatted in with our team or scheduled a call with our team. So I've been here about 2 years now, or just under 2 years.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, and Brandy's selling herself a little bit short. Her team are the ones that interact with you. So if you ever utilize the chat feature within Ideal Traits, that's Brandy and her team. If you ever scheduled a consultation or maybe an onboarding or had some questions about ad sponsorship or maybe assessments, it's Brandy and her team, right? So all the questions that you guys have, whether it be about the system or your hiring process or whatever it may be, that's Brandy and her team taking care of that for you. So Brandy, we appreciate what you, of course, and what your team does for, of course, Ideal Traits as a whole. And I'm sure the clients that are on here, or folks that have utilized Ideal Traits before, appreciate it too as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course. All right. So again, to recap a little bit, we're going to talk about the nurturer, the competitor, the networker, and the knowledgeable. So I know last month, on the first Tuesday of May, we talked a lot about the networker when we were talking about the sales personalities, even though we were focused on the four really main sales personalities: the persistent, the closer, the sales leader, and the salesperson. So again, we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So if you have questions about the networker, I know that's a lot of times can come up as an ambiguous personality where you kind of don't know where it sits, right? But as we did last time, we'll go ahead and share our screen here. We'll pay attention to the Q&A, obviously, as those come in. Once we come back from sharing the screen, we'll get to your questions and we'll make sure we finish up with the Q&A. But Brady and I'll sort of go through the next little bit in terms of what we've got prepared for you all, and we'll go from there. So, Brandy, give me the go-ahead. You able to see my screen? Should have the competitor on it.
Yep, there you go.
Okay, fantastic. So the first one that we're going to start with, everybody, is the competitor. So again, as we reviewed last week, the category that we want to pay most attention to is this under pressure. Okay, this is where push comes to shove, what we can expect from their personality. If you're seeing too many similarities across the board within the self perception, under pressure, and others' perception, that may indicate that there's a little bit of anxiousness when it comes to completing the assessment that's taking place. So again, you see it sort of here with your 46, 32, and 39, but where we would really symbolize that anxiousness if it was this sort of like this structure and routine funnel all across the board. Okay. A lot of blue scores, a lot of middle of the road, no real clear main strength, if you will. Okay. So again, we're going to focus on those people focused personalities. So we're going to take a look at persuasiveness and convincing. You're most commonly going to see is one of the higher traits of the 4 personalities that we're going to take a look at. And again, we're focusing on that under pressure category. Okay. So a couple of things about the competitor. Okay. The benefits to the team that they provide, they welcome challenge. Okay. So they embrace that challenge. They welcome it. They're very team focused. You're going to see that team focused nature come up a lot when we talk about these personalities that fall under the persuasiveness and convincing category. And they also are effective troubleshooters, right? So not only do they welcome that challenge, but they want to problem solve and they want to solve those issues too as well. Where they may need some support from you is they want perfection and they chase it. Okay. So that oftentimes can kind of trickle in from their thorough and compliance too as well. But perfection is what they're looking for, and they'll do what it takes in pursuit to make it happen. They can seem as very blunt, right? Again, we sort of see this trickle in from a combination of their persuasiveness and convincing and their thorough and compliance. It can oftentimes cloud up that a little bit. Again, when push comes to shove, they come back to that thorough and compliant nature. And then, sometimes that persuasive and convincing can take a little bit of a downtick from what you're used to seeing from them, as you can see here with their self-perception and there's other perception. They can be a little bit impatient and then they leap before looking. So it can be a little bit impulsive in that sense. But Brandy, in terms of the competitor, anything that, I might have missed that you want to mention there?
I think you kind of touched on that they want to be perfect. So sometimes they tend to be a little bit critical of themselves because they are kind of striving for that perfect.
Yeah. And it's important to note too, because when we go through a couple of the other slides, we're going to kind of break this down as we did last month when we talk about, we talked about the lion last week, which is that high motivation and drive. This week, we're going to talk about that high persuasiveness and convincing, which is the peacock, right? As we associate it to sort of in that animal universe. And the competitor can oftentimes, depending on what their motivation and drive score is, can be considered a sales personality, right, Brandy? Isn't it if their motivation drives over 60? Is that right?
Yep, 60. Yep.
Okay, perfect. So can be a little bit of a double-sided personality. I know last week, again, guys, when we were focusing on the lion, we solely focused on, the persistent, the closer, the sales leader, and the salesperson. If you see the motivation and drive for the competitor slip above 60 here, right? So if you see it go above 60 and you see it paired with a good persuasive and convincing score, could go from someone who could be a great customer service representative for you to someone who could be a great salesperson for you. Okay. So if you have some questions on what that looks like or how that breaks down, just let us know. But a good reminder too, that we're just showing you an example of one competitor. Okay. So anytime someone completes an assessment, if you have 20 people complete it and they all come back as competitors, you're going to see different performance indexes here. Okay, so if you have individual examples that you want to look at, Brandy, your team is open to scheduling assessment trainings too, correct?
Yep.
Okay, fantastic, right? So again, guys, if you have questions, look at it, go inside your account, click the help button. You'll see assessment training right there, and we can break down these individually or reach out to Brandy or myself after this. I'm sure we'd be able to help you too as well. But anything you want to mention again with the competitor, Brandy, or are we good to move on to the next?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, fantastic. So next we're going to do the knowledgeable. I mentioned right off the top that this is considered to be your triple threat. Okay. The reason that is because you have right here these 3 high scores under the under pressure category that fall in the persuasive and convincing, structure, routine, and thorough compliance. Okay. But generally across the board, you're going to see that the number 1 strength for the knowledgeable is going to be their persuasive and convincing. Okay. But not a very motivated personality. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad thing, but what it means is it's typically not a personality that we would recommend for an outbound sales role, more of maybe that inbound sales or more of that customer service. That seemed like a pretty accurate depiction there, Brandy, of roles we'd recommend. I know we'll get more into it, but sound pretty good.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, cool. Now, some benefits to the team. Also here, problem solvers, right? We see this within that high structure, routine, and thorough compliance. So problem solvers loves being the go-to, right? So they want to be the individual that has the answers and that people go to find the answers. And they also, sorry, I'm kind of losing on my writing here, but support that's needed if we transition into that. So some of the support that's needed for them, right? We talked about the strengths of being problem solvers and wanting to be the go-to person with the answers and obviously having that information, but they can be oftentimes unassertive. Okay. So what this could mean is that, they may not be good about setting boundaries, right? And they may need some assistance from you when it comes to working with clients on sometimes telling them no, right? Or being able to adequately tell them no. They may be resistant to change. We see this within the motivation and drive. As we covered last week, those personalities that have that high motivation and drive oftentimes make quick decisions and are flexible to change. Okay. But with your personalities like you see here, we've seen 11 in that under pressure. Change may not be something that they're overly comfortable with. So making sure that you give them all of the information onto why you're making a change will be incredibly important. They could be a little bit sensitive to criticism. Okay. This comes from them, of course, being that go-to person, right? They pride themselves on having the information and being the person that people come to for it. So when there's criticism on something that maybe could be doing better or may not be doing well enough, that of course could cause a little bit of sensitivity. And then you must have set guidelines and set priorities. Okay. So making sure that you tell them what they need to do and when it needs to be done will be a key component to the knowledgeable personality too as well. But we see this again with their high structure routine and their own compliance paired with that persuasiveness and convincing. So again, a really good personality that can really communicate very effectively with your current clients, can be really great when it comes to cross-selling and upselling. But if you're looking for someone to do some outbound selling, this isn't the personality generally recommended for that. But Brandy, what else would you like to add on to the knowledgeable here?
Yeah, I am a knowledgeable. I most recently took the assessment again and came back a knowledgeable. So, but a big thing too is they really don't like surprises. They are someone that likes to um, really not be put on the spot, know kind of what they're doing. And I can speak to this even coming on today. I was like, Nolan, what are you going to ask me? Well, I need to be prepared. So
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing too with outbound calls versus that cross selling is they feel much more comfortable kind of selling as a cross sell and upsell versus being put on the spot making that cold call and outbound call.
Yeah, that's so funny too that you mentioned that. And in my naturally persistent self, what did I tell you when you mentioned that you might be a little bit nervous about joining today?
You were just like, it's fine. You'll be fine.
It's fine. I said, don't worry, guys. You've got me to lean on, right? I can talk forever, which is great. But yeah, again, guys, Brandy, again, as she mentioned, is a knowledgeable herself, right? So if you're looking for some insight into someone who can directly relate and give you some insight into what you can expect from these individuals, it looks like we've got two of them on the team. Trevor's one of our inbound support team members. So again, if you're in the chat, Trevor's most likely the person that you're speaking with. And again, can give you some good insight into the knowledgeable personality. All right. Anything here that we want to cover, Brandy, before we go on to the next?
Nope, we're good.
All right. Fantastic. Next is that ever popular networker. Okay. So typically, when we get questions about the networker, it's like, does this person fit into sales? Does this person fit into service? Where do they fit? What can I expect? Okay. The networker is the most personable personality, in my opinion. And a lot of the times you got to be careful because they'll tell you what you want to hear, right? But as you can see, Tracy, who's been on our team for forever, her actual 10-year anniversary is June 15th, correct, Brandy?
Yep.
Is that right? June 15th. It'll be Tracy's 10-year anniversary. So, and again, if you do hop in the chat or you do whatever with Ideal Traits, if you interact with our team at all, wish Tracy a happy 10 years because that's, a decade of time is quite the accomplishment, especially when Ideal Traits has only been in business for the last 13 years. So someone who's been here since the very, very beginning. But a couple of things about the networker. Again, not all of them are going to be created equally. So you could see you're under pressure. If you go look at maybe the networker in your account, you could see that maybe their under pressure score for their motivation and drive is higher, right? But with Tracy, it's a little bit different. If you know Tracy, you know that she is just a people person through and through. Okay. So a couple of the benefits to the team, they initiate ideas, right? So they'll bring forward their ideas. They're thinking about things and they're thinking about how to improve things or make things better, and they will initiate those ideas and bring them to the table. They have an open door policy, so they're not afraid to have a conversation and not afraid to have those really direct conversations that typically are associated with an open door policy. And they can certainly motivate the team, right? Can be inspired to motivate the team. This is directly derived again, from that high persuasive and convincing score. As you can see with Tracy, she's as persuasive and convincing gets with being 100, right? So a good team motivator, loves to collaborate as a part of a team, doesn't necessarily enjoy working independently too much, right? But, needs to make sure that there's some team interaction and some camaraderie that are part of the role. So making sure that you provide those will be key. Okay. Now, some areas of support that you're going to need to provide, they can be quite impulsive, right? Again, we're going to see this sometimes with these high persuasive and convincing scores. They can just roll with the punches and just make decisions without truly maybe thinking about the outcome that can take place. They need constant recognition. Again, they want to be recognized. They want to make sure that you appreciate them. So giving them that constant recognition, and then also making sure that you come through with strong, effective leadership. Okay. You're communicating with them. You're making sure that they stay on task. Again, with a persuasive and convincing score like this, you can easily get hyper focused on the relationship and lose track of what you're looking to accomplish in terms of the task. Okay. So making sure that you have deadlines, you have strong leadership to make sure you keep the train on the tracks. Okay. I suppose is a simple way to describe it. But Brandy, Tracy, you've been working with Tracy now for almost 2 years. Tell us a little bit about your experience of working with her, and anything else you'd like to add on the networker.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely like on the service team, Tracy is phenomenal at building those relationships. She can deal with someone that's maybe having a difficult day or having a issue where they're frustrated and really build that relationship to de-escalate the situation when they are upset or having a rough time. So um, definitely with and I wasn't here when Tracy interviewed, but one thing to keep in mind too with networkers is they are phenomenal at their interviews, just because they are such people person and so keep that in mind. We have great interview questions within our help center too. If you guys ever want to rely on those, that will ask specifically about their fears and weaknesses, which is a great way to kind of dig a little bit deeper into networkers. But because they are such people persons and you can really like build a good relationship with them. Keep that in mind when interviewing too.
Yeah. And I'm sure we'll get some questions too on, like, again, as I mentioned at the beginning, sales, service, where do we go with this, right? So if you have a networker that has a result similar to Tracy's, right, I'm sure it's fair to say, Brandy, that this wouldn't be a personality that's recommended for an outbound sales role, right?
No.
And that comes, again, guys, from the motivation and drive. Okay, that's the one you're going to pay attention to. If you think about outbounds, you need high motivation and drive. There may be some anomalies that are out there, right? But again, in the most part, if you're looking to sort of put together your approach, the motivation and drive outbound role is what you want to look at. But Tracy did a great job of providing some add-ons to you all as clients over the last couple of months. So could be a good personality that you put maybe more of an inbound role, obviously providing exceptional customer support over the last decade, Tracy has, and then is also proven capable of being able to cross-sell and upsell for ideal traits too as well. And a similar personality could do the same for you. But again, networkers can oftentimes tell you exactly what you want to hear, right? They are people. They are people persons. I think.
What's the word?
Yeah, I don't know, but it's a tongue twister. But anyways, they exude, right, that persuasive and convincing. So they can be very convinced. They're incredibly convincing. They are incredibly persuasive. They are at the top of the list when it comes to that. So it is, without a doubt, their most dominant trait. So if you have any other questions on there, or again, as always, want us to take a look at a specific situation, let us know. But Brandy, anything else to add here before we move on to the last one, nurturer?
No, I think that's it.
Okay. All right, so we've got our last one here, which is the nurturer, okay? The last of the people-focused personalities. Again, with that persuasive and convincing being the most dominant trait, okay? Very similar to the networker, but you'll see slight differences in the high structure and routine, and maybe a little bit of an increase when it comes to the motivation and drive. But nurturer is probably the most popular customer service personality that is sought after. Kelly on our team is a nurturer. But a couple of the benefits of the team, they are incredibly patient individuals, right? So we see this from their structure and routine and their persuasive and convincing, making them more of relationship-oriented individuals. So they oftentimes can be very patient when it comes to accomplishing tasks because they're more focused on the relationship as it is, okay? People are important to sort of their motto, right? They believe that the people come first. So that could sometimes be to a detriment for you because you might have to remind them that, hey, at the end of the day, we, no matter the people, we got to get stuff done, right? They are also problem solvers. We see this within a lot of our persuasive and convincing personalities, because their knack and their attraction towards people wants them to interact and problem solve and find creative solutions to potential issues. And then, of course, they are one of the best, if not the best, when it comes to building long-term relationships. So a nurturer is often described as like the individual who just makes you feel warm, right? So if you have an individual on your team now that just makes you feel warm and you haven't sent them the assessment, they're most likely probably going to come back as a nurturer, or at least one of the personalities that we're covering here today. But some of the things where you'll need to provide them support is that they can be a little bit messy and untidy, right? Again, they're on the way end of the relationship spectrum. So they could get a little messy, could get a little all over the place. And this could affect sort of their organization when it comes to like their office work. So again, not the biggest issue in the world, but something to pay attention to, especially if it gets a little out of hand. They can be too trusting and too forgiving. Okay. So, again, you want to make sure that you rein them in. It's not all about the people, right? Sometimes you got to work to accomplish the task and, make sure that you hold people accountable to what they're telling you they're going to do. So again, another sort of telltale sign that it's probably not going to be good for a sales position, because within sales positions, you need people that will hold your prospects and your clients accountable. So it could be something to pay attention to there. So they love compliments and popularity, similar to what we heard about was it the knowledgeable that likes the recognition? Brandy? I think it was the networker. So the networker, as much as they like the recognition, similar with the competitor, right? At this point, you're going to find the same thing to be held true with the nurturer. Okay. So at that point, making sure that you fuel them with compliments and you make sure that they, feel appreciated, but you don't go overboard to where their ego gets in the way, or that might get too big. And then in addition to that, again, something that we've seen similar across a couple of these persuasive and convincing personalities is that they are resistant to change. Again, we see this with the lower motivation and drive score. It's not the lowest that we've seen, but again, not all nurturers are created equally. So again, the lower the motivation, sometimes the more resistant to change they're going to be. So making sure that you give them all the information that is necessary to making sure that they are able to understand why the change is being made, and then obviously, of course, adhere to it. So Brandy, with the nurturer, I'm sure you've seen it a lot, right? With the clients that you've worked with, as well as your experience in customer support. But tell me what else I missed maybe about the nurturer.
Yeah, I think you touched on a lot. Definitely, I feel like they are when you think of a customer service personality, they are perfectly fitting in that, with being like
Yeah.
understanding and good listeners and great communicators, with just building those relationships, but also like verbalizing it, listening it to like clients. So
Sure.
um, they have a lot of like the typical cookie cutter customer service personality traits.
Fair enough. Yes. Right. And again, that makes it the most desirable for your customer service roles. But again, wouldn't recommend this in an outbound sales role. I know I keep repeating that, but it can be easy when you hear somebody that can really build relationships. It can really, one of their main things is that they could build long-standing relationships. It could be easy to think that they could slip into that sales side of the business. Wouldn't necessarily recommend it for outbound, but maybe something to consider for that inbound if you're purchasing internet leads or driving traffic to them, or having them call winbacks, whatever the situation may be. Okay. So again, specific situations, reach out to us. But as we sort of transition into the second half, again, we'll get to your guys' questions here probably in the next 5 to 10 minutes. So make sure that you're firing those in there so that we can get to them. But I showed this graphic last month, of course, in May. And again, we were focusing on your motivation and drive, which was your lion, right? So your high motivation and drive, your personalities that you want to make it happen as fast as possible, quick decision makers, and of course, they are flexible to change. This month, we're focusing on the peacock, right? As I mentioned again a little bit before, which is your persuasive and convincing, right? Bright colors, right? Their personality stands out. They light up a room. That's what you got to think about with these personalities that we're covering. And of course, their communication styles too as well, right? So your motivation and drive loves to work independently, but doesn't mind working as a team. And then of course, they, as I mentioned just a second ago, they want things done quickly, right? So do it now. You're going to have that conversation change a little bit when you get into the persuasive and convincing, because you're talking about people who want to work as a part of a team. They want that camaraderie. They want to work together with people, and they want to make sure that their personality, quite frankly, is fueled by it, right? So if you put them in a I suppose, an individually contributing job where they're not talking to anybody all day, you're going to see them get very frustrated and probably burn out very quickly. Okay. So again, making sure that they have access to working as a team or communicating with your clients regularly, whatever that looks like, making sure that that's in place to, of course, again, fuel into their best trait, which is their personality. So a little bit of talk about the Peacock, right? So some of the things that we sort of can just, I guess, pool all of this together when it comes to the high persuasiveness and convincing with your Peacock type personalities is a lot of the things that we covered, right? So very outgoing, very trusting, very influential, very optimistic, and very animated. So you can see them, talking with their body, using their hands primarily a lot, very optimistic and positive. They can have a lot of influence over people. Again, when we consider folks that are very persuasive or very convincing, we consider them to have a lot of influence, build trust very easily. And of course, they are those outgoing personalities similar to the, Peacock that we're relating it to. But again, they seek that attention, right? So they chase it, they chase it, they chase it. And it's a relentless pursuit of it, which can lead to them, of course, being impulsive in their decision-making. That is all relationship focused or all personality focused. They can get distracted very easily with conversations, right? And they can also fear social rejection. So doing things that they need to do to make clients happy, although it may be skirting the rules a little bit, okay? That's sort of an exception to the rule because depending on the personality that you're working on, some of them have more or higher thorough and compliance or higher structure and routine, which may impact their fear of social rejection, which, kind of leads back to skirting the rules. But again, let's take a look at those individual examples together. But Brandy, anything just that you can group together with high persuasiveness and convincing, anything that you can think of that you might have noticed within your personality or, Tracy's or anybody else that maybe you've worked with or clients that you've associated with as well?
Yeah, I think one thing that first came to mind as we're going over this slide is like just our morning meetings, being on meetings with sales personalities, and then we have a customer service team. Like they are the ones at 8:30 a.m. that are like cracking jokes and building relationships, and um, even just our own service like team meetings. Like we are building relationships with just each other and chatting a lot with each other. So
Yeah.
um, those things all kind of pour into even just our personal lives and all those type of things as well. So it's funny because the sales personalities are like on the morning meeting, they jump right off, they're ready to get to work. Where if it was up to the service team, we'd probably stay chatting for another 20 minutes about the weather. So
Yeah.
it's funny how those things stack.
Yes. And a lot of the folks that are on here have probably experienced that with a team, right? Where we're asking about how their weekend went or how their upcoming weekend plans are looking, right? All these different things, because again, they have those people-centric personalities that are fueled by actually taking interest into you, right? Does that seem fair to say?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Right. Fantastic. So this is a graphic that we took a look at last week. So we talked about, the personality results that are going to associate with those line, but sometimes you can have those personalities that sort of blend into both, right? The salesperson is a very personable personality. Same with the sales leader that sort of kind of teeters that line between both the lion and the peacock, right? So again, as we focused on the sales leader, the salesperson, the closer, the persistent last month, and then of course, as we indicated, right, because we're covering the competitor this month, but if you have that motivation and drive score over 60, they find themselves into that sort of lion and peacock arena, right? Which makes them a good fit for your insurance producer, your LSP, agency producer, and so on, right? But what you shouldn't see and what you don't see here on the right-hand side is any of the personalities outside of the competitor with over 60. You don't see a knowledgeable there. You don't see a nurturer there, right? And you certainly don't see a networker. So making sure that you pay close attention to that, right? This is a lot of the outbound sales roles that we're talking about, right? Again, finding a sales leader, a salesperson, a closer, a persistent, or a competitor over 60 motivation could be a really good asset for that, okay? So now we get into those personalities that are a good fit for your hybrid CSR/sales, a regular customer service representative, same thing with the customer service sales representative, and so on, right? So we see there at the end that we have indicated the inside sales representative. So again, individuals that are answering the phone and giving a quote that way. So it could be inbound leads, it could be live transfers, it could be win backs, right? It's not cold calls where they're just completely reaching out without ever having communication with your office before or your business before, okay? So again, 45% admin and servicing accounts, 45% sales, right? upselling, cross-selling, retention, warm leads, referrals, developing quotes, meeting sales goals, and then, of course, again, 10% new sales win back. So a little bit of a smaller percentage when it comes to that, but predominantly the 90% focusing on a lot of inbound stuff or requoting things, okay? And again, we see this with the knowledgeable, the nurturer, and the competitor, and then we're also throwing organizer in there, which we'll cover in the upcoming months too as well, okay? So next is sort of still grouping that together. Work responsibilities that include the receptionist, the unlicensed CSR, admin assistant, and the billing specialist. The reason why we have the unlicensed CSR and the regular customer service representative sort of reach differently is because there's just different tasks that come with that. You all know that, right? Like a lot of times if someone's not licensed, they're probably not even allowed in your agency management system or in where they're actually able to bind the insurance. So answering the phone, setting appointments, data entry, developing quotes, paperwork, so on, right? So with that, we see the perfectionist, the knowledgeable, the competitor below 60, the researcher, and the consistent. So perfectionist is what Brandy used to be. So I'm sure she could shed some light on that too as well. And of course, the researcher and the consistent we will again cover in weeks upcoming. But the knowledgeable and the competitor below 60, great fits for these types of roles if you're looking to hire that for your office. But Brandy, it's an interesting point because we talked about how when you first had started with Ideal Traits, you were a perfectionist, but now you're the knowledgeable. But are those personalities vastly different from each other? Do they have a lot of similarities? Typically, where do you see that falling?
They're pretty similar. Like, I feel like a lot of times too, I highly recommend everyone retaking the assessment if you guys are using it in your office, of getting in a habit even every 6 months to a year, because as you are in different roles and also just like as you go through different things in your own personal life, I think it can really mold your personality. And you kind of grow into something you maybe struggle with and you're working on. Now it's becoming a strength and it kind of changes over time. So, um, yeah, for me, I think it was being in a leadership role. I feel like being a perfectionist, I couldn't always do everything exactly perfect. And it's really kind of molded me into a knowledgeable more. Where in this role as well, people come to me a lot. I want to feel like I am the best at like the knowledge that I am spreading and talking to clients. So, but very, very similar in numbers. Just kind of a little tweak, I feel like, being in this role for a few years.
All right. Perfect. Yeah, that makes total sense, right? And those personalities aren't vastly different from each other, right? They find themselves having a lot of similarities. I think the one thing that's probably you've seen take a shot up is you're persuasive and convincing. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, one thing that's really shot up. All right, fantastic. Well, folks, in terms of what we were planning on going over with you today with those first four personalities, that's what we've got. So if you do have questions that are in reference to these really, again, personality focused personalities, I recommend that you throw them in now. Brandy, anything else in terms of those, again, people focused personalities, maybe the best way to manage them, the best way to hold them accountable within the office, a couple of different strategies that maybe you'd recommend?
Yeah, I mean, definitely for us being remote, it adds a little bit more of an element of trying to keep, um, they want to build relationships, but we're also all across the country. So, one really good tactic for at least our team is giving the team the opportunity. We do something called water cooler every day, where it's 30 minutes on everyone's calendar that is available that they can jump on if they want to kind of connect with their coworkers. So definitely with employees that enjoy kind of building those relationships, we're able to get on for 30 minutes. They can get their social fill, hang out for a little bit, and then get right back to work, which is something that's been super helpful because I think a lot of them do like that teamwork aspect. If there's something that's come up work wise, they can ask me, ask a coworker, but then they don't lose that camaraderie of talking with their other coworkers and knowing kind of what they're doing in their day. But also, it helps them to stay more efficient because they're not messaging each other or going longer on a work meeting where we need to be focused. They have that designated time to really get their social fill and then kind of get back to work.
The social feel is important, right?
It
Because
is. It
they need
is.
it. Can't put
Do.
them on an island where they don't get it. So we've got a
Yes.
lot of questions that are rolling in now, Brandy. So hopefully we are ready to go. So Derek, I appreciate you throwing in the first question here. What position would you recommend for a consistent with a motivation and drive of 43, a persuasive and convincing of 43, a structure and routine of 64, and a thorough compliance of 57. So, Brandy, I'd have to take a look at the two outside numbers in terms of the self-perception and others' perception, but it seems as if we've seen some blending there. There's no real
Yeah.
number one positive, like number one strength that's really popping out in that performance index, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
bad on the spot. This goes back to my personality.
Yeah, 43,
But
43, 64, 57. Derek, I would want to take a look at that one, the full screenshot of the performance index. If you want to send it over to me via email, Brandy and I will both take a look, allow her to, of course, look into it a little bit more too as well. But we want to take a look at those outside windows because if we're seeing a lot of, sort of those middle numbers from 43 to 64 without really anything coming up as the main strength, could just be you've got a typical consistent, but based off of the motivation and drive and based off of the persuasive and convincing, probably looking at more of a customer service focused personality. But again, send us the screenshot or have us take a look. Let us know what candidate it is, and we can take a look within the account. So, Susan, how do we use this with an office of 8 women who have very different personalities? Great. Yes. This is a fantastic question. And what I would recommend, and Brandy might recommend something a little bit different too as well, but I would say that you should definitely have everyone take the assessment, right? Like that's what you should do. I think that a lot of times when you have very different personalities, just sitting at the table and helping understand how everybody's personalities works differently and how they prefer to communicate, what their strengths and weaknesses are, will help people really come together and fill in the gaps. So you do have the capability, Susan, within your account to send assessments unlimited. So at that point, what I would recommend is adding in all 8 of your employees, sending them the assessment, having them take it, and maybe on a Friday afternoon when things are a little bit slower or whatever that day looks like, you guys can go through each other's personalities and just help each other communicate with each other a little bit better, if that's maybe something that you're struggling with now. Brandy, anything you want to add there?
yeah, and I would say too, like being aware of each other's personalities is a huge benefit because sometimes you don't understand maybe why someone reacts that way or has like knowing their fears and their weaknesses, I think really gives insight into why they handle certain things, how they handle certain conflict or situations. So definitely with 8 very different personalities, I think it will give a little insight on like, oh, that makes sense why she kind of hates surprises or why she's so talkative or vice versa.
Yeah. And I think too, it's funny in that sense. I think, Susan, when you have people complete it, they'll find out that they're more alike than they thought, right? Like it might just be one
Yeah.
subtle thing that may be a little bit different, right? For instance, like you may have a persistent and a sales leader, right? 2 very motivated personalities, but just 2 different ways of communicating. But they oftentimes think very alike because they are very task-oriented individuals that want things to get done as quickly as possible, right? And as efficiently as possible. So yeah, have your team complete it, Susan. If you need help finding out how to do that, reach out to us. I mean, that's a very easy thing that we can show you how to do. But Brandy, this is a question for you from Carla. Carla wants to know if the water cooler is via chat or on a video
Yeah.
meeting, and is it at the same time every day?
Yep. So we do 2 p.m. every single day. It's blocked for 30 minutes, so anyone can jump on. It's on video, so anyone jumps on. Some days nobody gets on. Everyone's really busy. Some days we might get 5 or 10 people on there. So it's really flexible, kind of if people have time, but it's that blocked off 30 minutes every single day.
Fantastic. And then there was another water cooler question.
Yeah.
I like the water cooler hour. This is a separate chat room? Do you allow them that in the morning? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we do the afternoon, but also for Ideal Traits as a whole, we do morning meetings, which usually are quick, just kind of touch base. What's the agenda for the day? Or we kind of, no one can speak more on it too, but usually a motivational quote is said, kind of what's going on. So we also have that as well, which I think is helpful for more service and like people who want that little human interaction when they start in the morning for sure.
Yep, really good stuff. And then, Susan, I see a second question here from you. Will the slides be available? Reach out to me, send me an email. It's just Nolan@idealtraits.com. First name is just Nolan @idealtraits.com. Shoot me an email. I can get you the slides, and then you can take a look at those and have those on hand. Okay. But One other thing I do want to show you, because I know we've gotten some questions about the water cooler, and that's just one thing that Ideal Traits does, right? So something that we do that's, maybe you could incorporate into your process too. So Success Spotlight, I know we do this every month too as well. If you haven't ever checked out any of these sessions, a lot of these agencies are hiring remotely and are always looking for ways to incorporate really good camaraderie into their office. So Suzanne Dwyer is one specifically that I could highlight. She has a fully remote team. She talks about how they're able to make that happen. Of course, Jeremy Olson, half of his team is remote. So they talk about how they obviously work within that process. And then Lita Hankins is another one I would recommend checking out for someone who has remote employees who works to incorporate that sort of, again, camaraderie into their office. So I'll throw that link in the chat here too as well. So then you guys can explore whether it's something like a water cooler that we do, like we do at Ideal Traits, that works for you, or maybe something else that these agents do to make sure that their teams still feel connected. So if you haven't checked those out, 3 I recommend just right off of the top: Suzanne Dwyer, Lita Hankins, and Jeremy Olson would be 3 great ones for you to be able to learn from and incorporate. And then it looks like we did get a question from Tony. What happens if all 3 columns are similar? Your perception, under pressure, and what others think of you. Can candidates try to answer what I want to hear? So oftentimes the assessment will be able to indicate if it's being manipulated. And typically, if you see a lot of numbers that are becoming very closely related to each other, it's not someone who's trying to manipulate it. It's someone who is who is just a little bit anxious when they're taking it. So I think that falls under another one that we would want to take a look at for you, Tony. So if you want to send that over, similar to what Derek had mentioned, or what we mentioned for Derek, we'll take a look at it, because I don't know if it's, if it's persuasive and convincing and all 3 numbers are similar, then great. If it's everything within the performance index, then that may be a retake that we would recommend too as well. Okay, so hopefully that helps. And then, of course, if you guys ever see an inconsistent personality, that's an immediate retake. Okay, so anybody that comes through with an inconsistent, reach out, retake, because then that's most likely with them trying to manipulate the assessment. What I would do is I would give them a call, let them know that their result came back inconclusive, have them retake it, and tell them to just take a couple deep breaths or relax before they complete it. All right. So it looks like we're all out of questions here. So if anybody does have anything for us, please always feel free to reach out to us. We're available in the chat within your account or through our website. You can schedule a call with us directly through your account. Or, of course, always feel free to give us a call. And if someone's not available, we'll get you scheduled on a call with one of our team members. But reach out to us. Let us know. If you have anybody else that we could help out, please feel free to fill out the referral form that I linked in there. And we'd be happy to reach out to your friends and colleagues too. But Brandy, anything that you want to say before we head out?
Oh, I think that's it. Thank you for having me, Nolan.
Yes, of course. Thanks for joining, Brandy. And again, thanks for all you do for everyone at Ideal Traits, and of course our clients that are all here today. And Tony, to answer your question here before we hop off, the assessment does have a validity rating of 92.6%. So trust it as much as you would like, right, at the end of the day. But it is a tool and a resource that you can rely on, as 18,000 agencies across the country have utilized it, as well as it being university tested twice in order to get that about 93% validity rating. So would certainly rely on it. Again, if you want to walk through some assessments together, feel free to let us know. But thank you all again for joining. We appreciate it. We look forward to seeing you in July when we come back with our 4th assessment workshop, and we'll make sure that we get that link out to you so you can register. Thanks again. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.